You're permitted to ask questions whenever you want. I mean, the best is if you ask, you can ask questions in the chat. That would be ideal. Okay, please.
Okay, you're on.
We're ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Yisroel Bernath. I'm coming from Montreal, Canada. I can't say that it's not cold here. It's already getting cold. We see the semblance of winter coming our way, even though it's always a shock. No matter how many years you go through it, it's always this shock. Winter is here. Boom. Tonight is a very special night, as I thought what I would do with you this evening is perhaps share a story that you may have never heard before, yet it's deeply rooted in the story of the Torah. So if you take a look at the end of last week's Torah portion, the portion of Noah after the flood, it goes through these generations from Noah until this Abraham is born, or Avraham is born. And then this week's Torah portion, Lech Lecha, picks up Avraham is leaving his home. So how old was he? 2 days old? A day old? An hour old? How old was he when he leaves his home? I mean, he's born and then he leaves his home. Well, we know through the Midrashic stories that he was 75 years old. And so as a child, I always wondered, what happened for the first 75 years of Avram's life? What happened? What's the background? And why is it not told in the Torah? And what does it have to do with you and me? And those are the three main questions I want to answer tonight. Now, before I answer those questions, I got to give you some history and some background. So we're going back about 5,781 years and a couple odd weeks to be exact. Adam is created. After Adam and Eve are banished from the Garden of Eden, the Midrash says that God gives them a coat. This coat has a special power, says the Midrash. The power is that the animals are scared of it and the animals bow to it. Adam uses this coat to name the animals. He passes this coat. He passes this coat to his son Shem, who passes it to his son Seth, who passes it to his son, until it gets to Noah. When Noah was introducing the animals into the ark, the animals would come, and the Midrash says they bowed to him. And Noah only accepted animals into the ark that bowed to him. Actually, animals that didn't bow were left outside of the ark. Fascinating story. The Midrash relates that once the people knew that the flood was actually coming, they actually ran towards the ark and they surrounded the ark. And Noah said, "It's too late. I gave you 120 years. It took them 120 years to build the ark. I gave you 120 years to get into the ark. It's too late." And so they tried to get in. Well, the animals that didn't get into the ark, they attacked the people and the people ran away. Some of them devoured the people. We won't get into all the technical difficulties and details. So now Noah has this coat that was given to Adam. Noah uses it. It protects him from the animals in the ark. He's feeding the animals. Noah has 3 sons, Shem, Cham, and Yafet. The youngest one was Cham. Cham steals the coat in the ark. According to one Midrash, that's how the lion actually took off one of his limbs and made him lame because he didn't have the coat anymore and didn't protect him. Cham gives this coat to his son Cush, who gives this coat to his son Nimrod. Now, Nimrod is not exactly the most savory character. This Nimrod is a fascinating individual. He turns himself into a deity. He does insane things that no one had done before. At that time, everybody was vegetarian. Nimrod is the first recorded person to ever eat meat. He would stand up on top of the mountain and all the animals would bow to him, as so was the power of the coat. And the people saw the animals bowing to him and they said, my gosh, this man is God. And Nimrod, he took advantage of it. Oh, did he take advantage of it? It says he had a perfect shot. He could get a mosquito from across the room. At that time, majority of the world's inhabitants, as we know it, lived in a place called Kuta. This was early Mesopotamia. In Kuta, the Midrash says that Nimrod built himself a beautiful palace. This palace had a fascinating stairwells, and it had it was all the way that they would build houses, and those were these kind of domes. So this palace was domed, similar with a spiral, similar to the way that they would build their homes in those days. Well, Nimrod was such an amazing warrior. He's the first person to ever wage war, actually to wage war to kill off a family. Now, our story that we're going to tell tonight starts in the year 1948 from creation. If creation is 0, if Adam is born on the 6th day, we're now 1948 from creation. Fascinatingly enough, modern day 1948 represents a different time, which is a correlation. I'll have some fun tonight and I'll give you different correlations like that. Nimrod has a general, the captain of his army. His name is Terach. Terach and Nimrod, together with 450 men, they go to attack the family of Yefet. The family of Yefet lived in a city called Ram, and they attacked them and they killed out most of the family of Yefet. How many people? There's a debate in the Midrash, probably around 300,000 people were killed. Terach comes back from this great war, and he's all excited, the captain of the army. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. 3 months before this event that I'm going to tell you about, Nimrod has a dream. And it's a crazy dream. The dream is that there is a child that's going to be born that's going to overthrow him. So he does something that you may have, if you've studied the Pharaoh in Egypt, you probably have heard a story similar. He takes all of the women who are pregnant in all of Kuta, puts them into one area, and every child that's born is killed. Now, Terach is the captain of the army. He has royalty. He says to Nimrod, you're not going to put my wife is pregnant, but you're not going to put her there. No, you're the captain. Of course, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put her with the other simple people. And so his wife is exempt. His wife's name is Amatlai. Amatlai, Bat, the daughter of Karnava. So this Terach and Amatlai, Terach, now let's fast forward 3 months. She gives birth, and Terach comes back. She gives birth to a boy. He comes back from defeating the family of Yefet in the city of Ram, and he names this boy Avraham, the father of Ram. In order to celebrate this great victory that him and Nimrod and their army have. Now, To celebrate the victory and to celebrate the birth of Avraham, he makes a party the likes of which Kuta had never seen. And he invites all the who's who of Mesopotamia to attend this party. He also invites the famed stargazers of Nimrod. Everyone. I mean, you weren't a nobody if you didn't have stargazers. I mean, my teachers used to say that I used to look at the stars. I figured probably it's a good job for a boy like me who's always in the stars. You start stargazing. But you were a nobody if you didn't have stargazers. The stargazers are walking out of Terach's house and they see an incredible scene. They see 4 stars. They see 1 star in the sky. All of a sudden, from that 1 star come out 4 stars. And that other star eats up the 4 stars and shoots down to Terach's house. The stargazers immediately interpret that as this little boy, Avraham, that's born, is the boy that Nimrod's dream was talking about. He's scared. In order to give you a little visual, so you're not just looking at my talking head the entire night, one of my dreams as a child was to create an animation. And it was just a childhood dream. I obviously grew up on the Disney films, but I never had anything that I thought was kosher. That was something that I would be able to, show my children or to be able to be proud of on a more of a biblical level. So 14 years ago, I set out to create an animated film, and it was released 10 years ago. Exactly 10 years ago this week. So it's the 10th anniversary of the release of the film. It's done quite a bit. It's gone pretty far and wide. It was ended up being bought out by one of the subsidiary studios of NBC. And what I'm going to do for you tonight is, as I'm sharing the rest of the story, I'm going to put the film on silent. For those of you who want to watch the film with the actual sound, there's a link up that you'll be able to view it later on, or maybe some of you have already viewed it. But for tonight, for my discussion with you, I'm going to just put it on silent. I called it Young Abraham, from the ancient stories of the Israelites, or a tale from the Midrash. And you'll see the film kind of starts, again, Kuta, Mesopotamia. Remember, they built those domes, but we wanted to kind of get a feel for what Nimrod's palace looked like and who he was. So we did a lot of research on the kind of look, the look and feel of this ancient Mesopotamian city. The film opens up where I'm holding in the story, with the stargazers leaving the house of Terach after this great celebration for his son. And they see this incredible scene that I just described to you in the sky. A shocking scene. This is exactly how the Midrash puts it. Obviously, I use my artistic imagination, shining down right onto the home of Terach, showing that this young child that was born this night is going to take over the throne. Well, obviously the stargazers, look, Terach is God, Nimrod is God. If Nimrod is God, he already knows this. So if we don't tell him, think the stargazers, we're in trouble. And so the stargazers run to tell Nimrod that this child that's born to Terach is going to take over your throne. Nimrod doesn't know what to do because, Amatlai, this is Terach and Amatlai. Amatlai is exempt from this thing, but look, a prophecy is a prophecy and you don't mess with a prophecy. Now, Terach is so proud. One of the fascinating things I think about this world that we really don't understand is that there was a great desire for idolatry. People would worship stones. They worship stones. That was what it was. That was a world. Like we worship money today, our idol is money. Their idol was stone. It's so hard for us to really even relate to what that means, worshiping stone. Can you think about that? I mean, people would think the stone created me. So we're so removed from that, but we're not really removed from that because we worship money that same way. I don't know if it created me, but we worship money. We'll do anything for money. Money is life. Time is money. What we do for money today. Well, they had that same desire for idolatry. So Terach goes to serve the idols, to thank the gods for this great victory. As he's serving the idols, the guards from Nimrod come and say, Nimrod wants to see you. Now remember, he just finished a celebration. He's all elated. He made a big party. And now he is invited into the throne room of Terach. Of course, Nimrod wants to celebrate. He wants to congratulate him. And of course, what does Nimrod, the great Nimrod, do? He says, Terach, I'm going to make you a deal. I am going to give you gold and silver up into the roof of your home, the ceiling of your home. I'm going to fill your home to the ceiling with gold and silver in return for your child. So Terach does something fascinating, the Medrash says. He says, my dear king, I have a question for you. Remember last year, you gave me that great stallion, that horse, for my birthday. Well, there's a guy named Mardon. Mardon wants to give me a bushel of barley in return for the horse. What do you think? Is it a good deal? He says it's a terrible deal. Why would you take a bushel of barley when you're not going to have a horse to eat it? Because you're going to give the horse to Mardon. He says the same thing. Why should I accept your gold and silver if I have no child to inherit it? Well, Nimrod is exasperated. I give you 3 days to bring me the child, or I kill you. Now, the maidservant overhears this whole thing. She runs back to tell Amatlai. We're not sure in the Medrash whether or not Terach knew the next step. I'm going to go with what I think, and that is that Terach had no idea what was going to happen next. Amatlai realizes that this is a very serious thing, and Terach, being so true to the king, to Nimrod, he's going to bring their child, Avraham, to Nimrod. He's going to get him killed. This is the very sad part of the story. But the same night that Avraham was born, the maidservant also had a child. And so what Amatlai does is she changes the blankets. The blankets of Avraham she puts on the maidservant's child, and the maidservant's child blanket she puts on Avraham. She switches the babies. You know, it's very hard for me to wrap my head around good, bad, evil. I don't have answers for it. I'm telling you a story as a story is told in the Midrash. I don't like this part of the story. Terach goes home. And Amatlai takes Avraham in the blankets of the maidservant's child, and she leaves, and she runs away. And Terach takes the child that he thinks is Avraham and brings him to the king. The king rewards Terach for bringing him his child. He kills this child and gives Terach, as he promised, gold and silver up to the roof of his home. Terach retires from his army service, and he builds himself an idol shop with the money. He buys and sells idols of all shapes and sizes. You can see here in the film, Terach is taking the maidservant's child to Nimrod. Amatlai runs up the mountains to a cave, and she hides her son Avraham in a cave. There's a number of different midrashim that describe what happens next. the child is either raised by the angel Gabriel, or the child is raised by a servant that a matlai hires to raise the child. Yet this child is raised in the cave. There's a great debate in the Midrash as to what age he was when he ventures out of the cave for the first time. We follow the Midrash that he was 3 years old when he ventures out of the cave for the first time, but most of the Midrashim will say he's 13 years old or he's 23 years old. What we did here in the film, and you'll see soon, is we actually covered all three of the Midrashim by kind of showing a montage of the three different ages. So for the first time, he's raised in there in this cave, and he's not raised in Kuta. He's not raised in the main city, so he doesn't really understand the nature of idolatry so much because he's kind of removed from that. But there's a lot of discussion about spirituality and where is God and the creator God, who created this, who created that. And so he ventures out of the cave for the first time as a 3-year-old, and he watches a scene of a flower opening. This beautiful scene that we probably have seen so many times, either in a film, that flower blooming. And he says, this is magnificent. And he follows the rays of the sun up towards the sky. I'm just gonna fast forward this. He follows the rays of the sun up towards the sky. And he says, my gosh, look at that sun. This must be the creator God. And he sits there staring at the sun until nighttime. But at nighttime, the moon takes over the sun. So he says, oh, the moon must be the creator God because it took over the sun. And he does this over and over again. And I love this natural process, how he goes from a little flower blooming all the way through. And he goes through this process through nature of understanding monotheism and creating the creator God. Now, what's fascinating about this is that Avraham is going to do something that today we don't really appreciate. Majority of the world as we know it follows the ideas of Avraham, monotheism. It's very accepted in the world. All the three major religions follow the ideas of Avraham. But here in this time, in 1948, or now we're a little further on, let's say 1961. So 5781 minus 1961, you can do your math. How many years ago this was? Almost 4,000 years ago. 4,000 years ago, here is a young man who stands alone. And he has a very powerful, very important job to do. I never understood him. My favorite biblical character is Joseph. I love Joseph. And we can talk about Joseph all day and all night because I love Joseph as a character. I think he embodies so much of our world today, who we are. And I would say he is the kind of person that we all want to be. But Avraham, I never understood him. A man on a mission. He's so focused, so strong. He'll do anything to convince someone that there's a creator God. One of my favorite lines from the film is when he goes back home and he tries to convince his family there's a creator God. And his family says, you expect us to believe in a God that you can't see, you can't hear, and you can't sell? Because they're in the idol business. So he is doing everything to try to create. I mean, later on, we could talk about, how he sets up a tent in the middle of an oasis in the middle of a desert. And people would come to that oasis. And if they didn't, they would eat and drink. And they'd say, Avraham, how much do I owe you? And he'd say, how much do you owe me? You owe me nothing. Just pray to my God. He's like, I don't want to pray to your God. I got my own gods. Oh, you got your own gods? Okay, $1 million. He'd blackmail people into praying to his God. Now, I don't like that. That's not my style of living. I don't want to blackmail people into monotheism. But here is a person who stood alone, a man on a mission. And it doesn't make any sense. This is actually one of my favorite moments of the entire film, where he really understands. Remember I said 13 or 23, so he's 23. And when he realizes at 23 that there's really a God, he covers his head, saying that my head is not the highest part of my being, that there's something above me. I love that moment. This is one of my favorite moments of the film. So I just don't understand this Avraham. And the struggles, the trials and tribulations of his life embody this great struggle to teach the world monotheism. This is the first time he goes back to Kuta. Now Kuta is called Kazdim. They changed its name. And he's shocked to see the idolatry is rampant. I mean, it's everywhere. Remember, the flood wasn't that long ago. Noah is still alive. The flood wasn't that long ago. And people have once again become a different kind of corrupt. Before the flood, it was a lewdness. This is a spiritual corruption. And you know, the truth is, I don't know which one is worse. And we aren't to judge which one is worse. But there's a real corruption that's going on. People, maybe let's say that they're going on the right path in the wrong direction. Well, if it's the right path in the wrong direction, it's not the right path. Yeah, maybe it's easy to convince them and turn them around, right? So then they're going on the right path. But if they're on the wrong path, they're on the wrong path, and it's rampant. This is what people are doing. Avraham doesn't understand it. The Medrash says, and this is one of the most famous Midrashic stories, probably one that you've heard before, if you've heard any of the Midrashic stories of Avraham, where either his father got sick and had to go away, or his father realizes who he is and he faints and they take him to the hospital, or he's on a trip, but he's not there. He's not there. And Avraham gets left in the idol shop by himself. Now, the Midrash tells a number of stories of different people who came into the idol shop. He says, the Midrash says, there's a man of 60 years old walks into the idol shop and he says, I need an idol. I need a good one, a big one. And he says, I don't understand. How old are you, sir? He said, I'm 60 years old. And you want to purchase and pray to an idol that my father made yesterday? You're 60 years old. And he convinces him not to buy it. Another woman walks into the shop. Here, this woman walks into the shop and she says, my idols were stolen. My idols of protection were stolen. I want a new idol for protection. So he turns to the woman and says, if they can't protect themselves, how do you expect them to protect you? And a number of people, the Midrash tells a number of stories of people that come into the idol shop. Finally, a woman comes into the idol shop with a se'ah. It was a classical measurement of the time of flour. And she wants to serve one of the idols, the flour. And so Avraham, it says the whole time as he's there, as people come in, he would give them different demonstrations. You know, he would demonstrate. He's like, oh, what kind of idol do you want? He's like, oh, I want this idol over here. And he would smash the idol as they would look at it. And he started smashing the idols. I love demonstrations. So I did a lot of the voices for the film also. Anyway, I'm sorry. For those of you who didn't see it before, you'll have to see it with the audio. It's really fun. It was really fun to create. It took 4.5 years to create this film. And so and as the Midrash tells, he's smashing the idols as he goes along, giving various demonstrations to various people coming into the shop. This is how you sell the idols, right? You smash them. Are you listening to me? Anyway, with his ears in the idol. So he ends up smashing all the idols in the shop. And there's a great moment after he smashed the idols in the shop where his father comes running into the shop. And he has this great dialogue with his father, who now obviously sees his entire shop is just destroyed. By the way, this was like, I love this because as a child, this is the kind of how you understand. I would picture this as a kid. This is how it looked. And Avraham tells him the story about this lady came in and she was serving the idols, and all the idols were fighting who wanted the food the lady was serving, and there was a big brawl. And when the dust settled, I looked around and the hammer is in the biggest idol's hand. And his father, Terach, turns to him and he says, "You expect me to believe that? These idols can't see and they can't hear and they can't wield a hammer." And he looks at him and he says, "Then how can you worship them?" And Terach realizes the prophecy was true. There's a debate whether Terach turned him in or the guards came and arrested him, or Avram himself turns him in. But we'll go with this very interesting medrash where Avram actually turns himself in. So he goes through the streets of Kasdim. Remember, Kuta was turned to Kasdim, and he's taking these idols and he wraps these smashed idols with a rope, and he's going around the streets saying, "Useless idols for sale. Who wants a useless idols? They can't see, they can't hear, they can't do anything for you. They're completely useless. Who wants them?" And he takes that idol all the way into the palace of Nimrod, smashes all the idols in the palace of Nimrod. And then he has this amazing course back and forth. Nimrod finally does this thing in front of all the people at Nimrod's party. Nimrod kind of turns himself into his god. He says, "I'm the god." He says, "If you're the god, then why can't you make the time stop? If you're the god, make the sun rise in the east and set in the west. If you're a god, then you should know what I'm thinking right now." And he does this very funny thing. Nimrod realizes that this is the kid. And so if you look here, there's a debate whether it was a fog, or when they tried to get him, it was a fog, or there was a swarm of bees. We went with the fog, that he ran away through the fog. They end up he puts him in prison and gives him no food or water, but he survives there. A miracle happens and a stream appears and a tree appears. And he actually, because of that, he ends up converting the prison guards to monotheism. I skipped a piece because the film here kind of skips around, but he ended up one of the things I never knew before this was he spent time in the yeshiva. So the Medrash says, I knew, that he spent 38 years of his childhood in yeshiva, with the yeshiva of Shem and Noah. He studied with Noah. Now, if you look at the timeline, it actually makes sense. If you look at when Noah was born, so there was a 78-year overlap. This is Noah in the film. And it just totally makes sense where Noah is teaching him of what he saw and why God destroyed the world. According to I had a question here. Can you please give us more background about when this yeshiva started and how long it continued? So it depends on which midrash we go by. Either he's 3 or he's 13 or he's 23. So from that time, he ends up spending 32 years in yeshiva. So at some point, so let's say in best 30, 23 plus 32 is 55. Let's say that he's 55 when he leaves yeshiva. Let's go with that. Did I do that math right? Yeah. Yeah, he's there the entire time. Just someone asked, and the yeshiva itself, how long did it last? He was there day and night. I mean, I think the film shows it very well. Right here, you can see it. He studies day and night to the point where he himself becomes a teacher in the yeshiva, and the film itself is showing him being now teaching the Torah of Noah and his son Shem, and also later on the grandson Aver. So it ends up later becoming the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. That's where Jacob goes runs in Haran. When he runs away, he goes to the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. But at this point, Noah is still alive. And so when did Noah, I believe, according to the Midrash, Shem started the yeshiva, but Noah joined him. It was Shem that was really the righteous one, but Noah also, was righteous in his own way. And I think about that passing of information from Noah to Shem and then to Avram. That just those 10 generations, just 10 generations between Noah and Avram. You can look that up online. You can see the 10 generations. I think about the passing of information between these two. Noah had an opportunity to convert the world, and he chose to just save his family. Think about it. In 100, Scotty, if I gave you 120 years to convince somebody to become a Noahide, could you do it in one person in 120 years? Could you do it? One person? I say one person. Yeah, he's saying, yeah, of course. One person I can do it. In 120 years I can do. Well, Noah has 120 years while he's building the ark. That's why God gives him so much time. And in 120 years, he does not manage to convince one person because Noah didn't want to convince anyone. He was like, it's me and my family. It's me and my family. That's all it is. Noah doesn't want to convince anyone into monotheism. Now, Abraham is a very different character. Abraham does what Noah is supposed to do before the ark. He basically is the true child of Noah because Noah was supposed to spend 120 years convincing the world to change their ways. But instead, that's what Avram does. Avram spends his days from his very youth until his very last days convincing the world that there's a God, that there's one creator God, and it's not Nimrod. And so I think that it's amazing to see that connection. I never knew until I did this research on the story and studied all the midrashim. I never knew that connection, that incredible connection between Noah and Avram and sharing, that continuation of information. To me, that was just like mind-blowing. And it totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. So he goes back. And when he goes back, that's when the story happens where he ends up in jail. Well, meanwhile, so now he's in jail. I went back I wanted to give you the background on the story. Now he's in jail. Now Nimrod decides he is going to show all of the world that he is truly God by killing Avram. He's going to kill him in front of all the people. He says, there's a traitor in our midst. And this traitor, we're going to throw him into the greatest fire that we ever built. And there's a midrash that says for 7 days they brought all their wood. Some say for 40 days. There's a lot of 40s in the Torah. So let's go with 40. For 40 days, the people brought their firewood. Someone just asked a question. Was Shem still alive when Avram was at the yeshiva? For sure. Shem was the son of Noah. So Shem was even alive in the times of Jacob. When Yaakov went to the yeshiva, Shem was still alive. So Shem was this was Shem's yeshiva in every way, shape, and form. So let's fast forward to the fire. So he's like, so the people for 40 days, they build this massive fire in the middle of Kasdim, this incredible fire. It's unbelievable. So much that anyone that goes near it is killed. That's how much. Out comes Nimrod, makes a big speech in front of all the people before they light the fire. Remember, he had a perfect arrow. According to one midrash, it says before the Tower of Babel. According to another midrash, it's after the Tower of Babel. We'll talk about the Tower of Babel in a second. But he shoots up the arrow to the sky. During the Tower of Babel, it says, the midrash says he shot up an arrow and it came down bloody to show that he said to the people that he killed God. But this time, he'd shoot up arrows to the sky and they come down. This one, he took a lit arrow with fire and he shot it up to the sky and it came down and it lit the fire. And out come these 8 men and they're carrying Avram. It's unbelievable. Everyone's watching how they're going to take the traitor and they're going to burn him. They're going to burn the traitor. This is fantastic. Well, They march towards the fire, and the 8 men collapse dead. And there's Avram laying there chained by himself. So they have to take a rope to kind of pull him out of the fire because everyone's gone. And anyone who went near the fire was killed. Now, something fascinating happens because I'm going to go to the verse in the Torah that talks about the fact that Haran died before his dad. Now, Haran, which was the brother, right? Avram had 2 brothers, Nahor and Haran. And Haran was a sorcerer, or so they thought he was a sorcerer. So Nimrod thought that maybe this whole thing with Avram surviving in the fire was sorcery. Now, at this time, Haran wasn't sure if he believed in Avram's God or not. So what Haran does is he says in his mind, if Avram survives the fire, then I'm going to believe in Avram's God. If he doesn't, I'm not going to believe in it. So when he sees Avram surviving the fire, he says, this is my God too. So when Nimrod turns to him, thinking he's a sorcerer, he says, Haran, do you believe in Avram's God? He says, yes, I do. They throw him into the fire, and he rolls out dead in front of his father. And that's why it says that Haran died in front of his father, because he was killed in this fire. Avram is still in the fire. I'm just going to fast forward here. I apologize, I can't show you the whole thing, but you can watch it on your own time. Avram is still in the fire. First of all, how they get him into the fire is they catapult him in, because there's no other way to get him into the fire, because nobody can go near it. So they catapult him in. Here we showed Nimrod throwing him, but they catapulted him into the fire. And everybody goes home. 3 days later, they come back. One midrash says a cloud had covered Avram in the fire. Another one says a garden in the fire. We went with the midrash of the garden because it's just more aesthetically pleasing. Sorry. I probably think it was more like a cloud, but come on. Garden or cloud, which one would you pick? You know what I mean. Sorry. I still have, still got to do the visuals. Come on. So they come back and they see this guy, this Avram, he's in the fire and there's a garden. Nimrod can't believe it. He's got to see this for himself. This is unbelievable. He said, this is sorcery. This is insane. 3 days later, he's still in the fire. So they send, it says he sends the soldiers in to get him. The soldiers die. He sends the next group in, they die every time. So finally, he has to convince Avram to come out of the fire. Avram comes out of the fire, and everyone bows to him. And Avram says, don't bow to me. I'm not the real thing. Bow to God in heaven. And it says that for 2 years, at that point, even Nimrod bowed to God in heaven. And the people of Kasdim, which they now changed to Ur Kasdim because of the fire, they changed to Ur Kasdim, they destroyed all their idols. They threw them all into the fire. And this went on for 2 years until the story of Avram leaving, which opens our Torah portion. And there's other interesting stories we can talk about this guy Rakyan and the Pharaoh in Egypt. And that is the story between Noah and Lech Lecha of the Midrash, the first 75 years of Avram's life, because Avram is 75 years old when he leaves his father's house, spends 5 years in Haran, then goes on to Canaan, and later ends up in Egypt. What's also fascinating about it, if you look at the path that Avram takes, he does the entire width and length of the biblical land of Israel, which in its own is fascinating, because in those times when you bought a piece of land, the way you would acquire the land is you would walk its width and its length. And so Avram, in his journeys, if you actually take and look at the map of Avram's journeys, I have an amazing book here. If you've never seen it, I'm going to show it to you. I like the fact that I'm sitting here at my library. You can see at least part of my library. This is about, I have 9 bookcases here, but this is only about a quarter of my library. So I have this Bible atlas that I bought. It's from 1825. I love some of these old, I have a lot of these really cool things. So you can see, this is, I wish I could show this properly to you, but this is the original biblical Canaan. And Avram, actually, you can see the journeys of Avram and Canaan, how he walks the entire biblical land of Israel in his journeys. There's so many more things. We can just go on all night on the various elements and making those kind of synapses and connections for you. I'm going to end the formal part of my talk here. And I know you probably have questions, and I'm happy to take your questions. If you didn't see the connections with our world today, then I don't know what to tell you. Just the connections and thinking about Avram's life, and from Mount Hermon to Gaza. Yes. The walk actually is from the Nile to the Euphrates. Really, that's the length of it, and the width of it is from Mount Hermon to Gaza. Okay, the next, here's our first question for the evening. Well, first question post my talk for the evening. Are there any other movies like this in the pipeline? This is so beneficial, informative, inspirational to us as Noahites. Is there also a way for us to share as a family and friends? So you're welcome to share it with family and friends. I didn't tell you anything. This is not, but you have a link there that you can share with your family and friends. Absolutely, it was my honor. It only cost $1.8 million to make. So I don't know if is there another one in the pipeline? Not of this caliber. This was just my childhood dream, and I fulfilled that dream. I wanted to do more. I know. Thank you, Wayne. We need that. More and more and more. But it was my childhood dream that I fulfilled. And I actually am working on a lower budget film right now. I did one on David, which unfortunately got tied up in some legal battles, so never came out. And nothing to do with me. I don't deal with all the legal stuff. And when you deal, unfortunately, in the world of film, that's what ends up happening. And I'm doing one now on the story of Shimshon. So that's going to be coming out. There's a really great Jewish Orthodox kids like Netflix called Tovedo, Toveedo. So I'm doing a number of films for them right now. They haven't, none of them have come out. I have just the audio of it for now, but it's coming out soon. We're going to be doing some. They're lower budget, but we're going to be doing some stories based on the Midrash for them. I also produced an audio Bible. So, and one of my thoughts was to actually do like an audio, and like as if it was a film, but an audio version of it, as if it was in like an animated audio Bible. So that was one of my thoughts. I may end up doing that. It's definitely lower budget than doing a full film. What else? What are your thoughts on this? How old was Shem when Avram went to yeshiva? Well, let's take a look at the timeline. If Avram was born in 1948, let's get our very important index of Jewish history. These are very important books to have around. See, well, let's take a look at Shem. Shem, I believe Shem is born in the year 8. He's born in 1558. Is that right? How is that possible? Enosh. Yeah, Shem is born in 1558. And Avram was born in 1948. So Shem is 490. Let's say Avram goes to Yeshiva at 23. So Shem is 513 when Avram goes to Yeshiva, and he dies in his 900s. He's 917 when he dies, I believe. So if I'm just doing this off the top of my head. So he's around for he's around for a lot of it. Shem is around for quite a bit of it. Even through the children of Jacob. I think he dies maybe right after the first or second child of Jacob is born. So he sees a lot of it. There's a couple of interesting people who see quite a bit of all these stories. One of them is Og, the king of Bashan. You've heard of Og? Og is a giant. It says, the Midrash says that the Nephilim, the fallen angels, you may have heard of them. He was one of them, and he survives the flood. We don't know exactly why he survives the flood, but he survives the flood and he's killed by Moses. Think about how many years that guy lived. But according to the Torah, Methuselah is the oldest ever lived. He lived to 969. So I don't know. We don't know. I mean, Og survived the flood. In the 16s and 2-4. I mean, yeah, Og's got to have lived. You know, the Exodus of Egypt was 2448. So that's already 800 and something years. I guess it's not 969. So Og lives like 969. Where does Nimrod's coat end up? It's a very good question. Where Nimrod's coat ends up. According to one midrash, that was a Technicolor coat that Jacob gives to Joseph. The coat keeps on coming back over and over, according to one midrash. Who killed Nimrod? Did Rebecca give Joseph the coat? No, Jacob gave Joseph. Oh, yes. Rebecca gives the coat to Jacob. That's right. Thank you. This is the coat. Rebecca gives the coat to Jacob because that's how he gets the blessing from Isaac. And then Jacob gives the coat to Joseph. And then obviously the coat ends up in the hands of the brothers and then is brought back to Jacob. I don't know what happened to it. It was full of blood because they put it, the brothers put blood all over it to show that Joseph was dead. So I don't know what happens. We don't hear about the coat after that. Who kills Nimrod? According to one opinion, Nimrod is killed by Tuval Cain. He's killed by the grandson of Cain. His name is Tuval Cain. He's an evil guy. He's interesting. Oh no, I think he's sorry. I think he's killed by Kedar LaOmer. I don't think Esau killed him. I can double check. Again, I'm just doing it off the top of my head. What does the Midrash say about Og? Has any country good Torah? I don't know. I mean, we can go into Og. Og is we'd have to do an entire just a piece just on Og to understand who he is, where he comes from, how he goes through. I had this. I've all these ideas in my head, but one of my ideas as a kid is I wanted to do a comic book series called Og, where it goes through the entire story of Genesis up until, in the middle of Exodus until he dies through the eyes of the evil guy Og. And you see like all these things happening, but you see the entire story through Og's eyes. That was one of my dreams. It seems sad that they returned to idolatry. Yeah, look, history repeats itself, and you can see a lot of the same themes happening over and over again. You see, and I think in today we have to look at the Bible and see the themes of it and how it relates to our lives today, because it's our story all over again. Look at the world. You know why? Do you know why God made the flood? Because of moral and ethical corruption. Do we have to talk any more than that in our world today? And God promised that he would never bring a flood again, but every time we see that rainbow, we have a reminder of that covenant that God made with Noah. People say, oh, that's so beautiful, that rainbow. Actually, that's the reminder. And if someone just sent me a direct message that says absolutely nothing has changed, and I agree with that. Maybe you're right. Everyone seems to think that Esau killed Nimrod. Maybe you're right that Esau killed Nimrod. I'm thinking that Cain was killed by Tuval Cain. I think Esau killed Nimrod. You're right. The coat was made of different animal skins. Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you. Rashi says he killed him. That makes sense. Okay, what else? By the way, if I can send you all the sources. I have a list here. I'll show you what I did here for you. I did this years ago, but I can send you this list here if it's interesting for you. And that is, I'm just going to bring it up on the screen here. Here, this is all of the various midrashim that I spoke about tonight. You know, Avraham starts to about God, Nimrod heard send soldiers after Avraham. These are all the different midrashim, all the sources. Terach invented stamping coins. Terach got sick or he went on a trip. You know, the bigger, he tells Avraham, the bigger the idol, the higher the price. He gives him some sales advice, according to the midrash. Avraham hit the hammer on the idol's heads. Do you want this one or that one? Here's another midrash. So the story I just told you brought all these midrashim together. But actually, if you see, here's my abbreviations. These are all the midrashim that I used for my little talk tonight. And I can send you this little source sheet if you'd like. Just so you see that I wasn't off the top of my head. I just wanted to make it into a fun story for you, because it's much easier if you hear it as a story. But I didn't make up the story. I'm just a storyteller. What else? I'll read this question here. It seems that that was Jonah's challenge also, why he didn't want to go to Nineveh. So how today is it different? We know that our efforts to be like Abraham are not in vain. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because, well, you know, yes, you're right. God says to Jonah to go to Nineveh because of the evil. I think that our job today is twofold. Yes, there is an element of Abraham and of Jonah in it, of making sure to be ethical and moral and follow the ways of Noah and follow the ways of God. Absolutely, no question about it. But our job is also to make this world, to work this world and make this world a good place, to actually be able to bring godliness into this world. Now, what I mean by bringing godliness into this world is by actually having the ability through our actions to bring light into this world. You know, one of the great questions theologians have asked for centuries is light a creation of its own? Sorry, is darkness a creation of its own, or is it the absence of light? It's a great question. Is darkness a creation of its own? Is there really evil in the world? Is darkness a creation of its own, or is it just the absence of light? Well, we believe that it's just the absence of light. And the moment you flick on that switch, it looks like the darkness never existed. That's our job. Our job is to continue flicking on that switch as if the darkness never existed. And yeah, it's hard. There's a lot of reason. I mean, mental illness, I think the hardest thing through this pandemic has been mental illness and what it's done to us. It's very difficult. The quarantine, the difficulty in our lives, we must continue to look at the light, to see the brightness in everything that happens. I can't tell you why, and it's not our job. What are we? We are, as Mark Twain once said, we're dim puffs in the blaze of the Milky Way. What do we know about God's doings and what's going on in the cosmos? We don't know anything. Come on, just because I didn't see it means it doesn't exist? We don't know anything. But what we do know and what we can control is how we react to the situations and the things in our lives. That is all we really have control over. How do I react to the situations in my life? What happens in my life? How do I react to that? That's our job. And I think today, right, not just today as a universal today, I'm saying today, right now, right here, our job is to react with light. Our job is to be able to look at this and say, this too is good. How is it good? That's not a question. But my reaction to it, no matter what, is I'm going to try. The person in front of me at the store, I don't know what they've been through. They may have been quarantining for the past 14 days. I don't know what they've been through, but I'll tell you what I do know is they need a smile. They need a joke. So I'll say hello and crack a joke. You know why? because that's what the world needs right now. That's what our job is, and it's that simple. You bring a smile to someone's face, you did exactly what you're supposed to do, and that is the Abraham in you. I see the rabbi's kicking me off. I can be here all night.
Actually, I want you to stay on for a second because I want to bring up this point you mentioned is really, really amazing to me. This is my thought process about Abraham, and journey from Noah to Abraham. I didn't know this, but I didn't think about this. But this is you brought this to my mind. I didn't know that the 120 years that Noah built the ark really paralleled the 120 years that Abraham lived. So instead of preserving himself, he was out there day in, day out, not only discovering, but also sharing. And
That's right.
I think that the big difference when I looked into Abraham, and especially we learned about him, in our teachings in the Chassidut, is from being the first address that the Lubavitch Rebbe gave, was that he said you got to be like Abraham, which is you got to be kind. You have to be almost you have to have self-sacrifice to be kind to others. And he brought a lot of stories there. That's what it's about. That when you're kind and you share, and you share about God in a kind way, and then people turn around. That's what it fascinates me, and I think we say the Noahide movement, but it's really the Abraham movement taking over the Noahide, commands or whatever.
Well, the Abrahamic movement is just a natural continuation of the Noahide movement.
Exactly, and nowadays I think the difference. I agree with you. The difference nowadays is that we just got to turn the light on because the world's been prepared. People are waiting to hear this. They've been thousands of years. They've heard about this, and now there's a film about Abraham. That's it's even better. So
it's all obvious. This is all common sense. I didn't tell you anything you didn't know already. It's all common sense. That's how open and that's how real this is from the world. It just, oh yeah, duh. Obviously, this is the way, of course, we think, oh, everyone always thought like that. That's why when we look at these people who are bowing down to idols, we're like, who are these people? What are they doing? You really think that stone created you? Come on. Some good salesman.
Well, I think this is. I definitely look forward to you sharing us with us more, and definitely I know you're involved with many in your community that are involved with the Noahide movement. That's beautiful, and definitely there's people around the world here. On this session right now, we have people all the way from Kenya and all the way from all around the world. It's fantastic, and I thank you all for joining today. The only way we can do this is so to speak a tidal wave, a flood wave of Abrahams, shall we say, to the world. And thank you for bringing this, Rabbi Bernath, for bringing this subject of Abraham to our imagination, to our hearts through this film, and definitely for sharing with us this evening. So, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining. And yes, we will continue on with our next session, and I'm sure that we'll. If anybody wants a private message to Rabbi Bernath, what's the best way? If you have a question further on, Rabbi Bernath?
If you have a question, you can get a hold of me anytime, either rabbi@jewishdg.com, or you can just message me. I have a website, theloverabbi.com. I hate the Love Rabbi thing, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So if you go to theloverabbi.com, you can message me. It goes right to me.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bernath. And thank you all for joining. And I wish you all the best. I hope to see you all soon on Unite to Study. And if you, Rabbi Bernath, we'll get you on there soon as well.
Anytime.
All the best. Thank you so much.
You're all welcome. Keep that little Abraham spark within you. You got that little Abraham. Keep it strong. Keep it alive.
Thank you.